You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Tonight, I'm joined by Dr. Bernie Beitman, who is a psychiatrist trained in pretty great places, Yale Medical School, Stanford, and then was chairman of psychiatry at the University of Missouri in Columbia. So we're talking a serious intellectual player. So when we talk about what he's studying now, just know, well, you know, Dr. B, the fact that we have people with scientific prowess and they step over to the other side. So, you know, we're each of us, you and I both, have stepped a little bit over to the other side. So we're kind of challenging the parameters of materialism. And I'll just throw that out as a thought. But anyway, Dr. Beitman wrote a book, Meaningful Coincidences: How and Why Synchronicity and Serendipity Happen. Well, I love that topic because my life is filled with those moments. And so we're going to talk about his work, his book. And so, Dr. Beitman, how do you get from an academic psychiatrist and land in this, what some people of strict academic backgrounds would call the murky area of synchronicity and coincidence, and actually validate it?
It began when I was 8 or 9, and had a lot of meaningful coincidences before I went to medical school. It started when my dog got lost. I came home, my mother didn't know where he was. So she said, maybe the police department knows where he is. And I rode my bike over to the police department, and the big man behind the big desk said, I don't know where he is. And I started walking back to my bike and then pedaled the wrong way home, and was crying. And because I went the wrong way, I ran into my dog Snapper, who was looking for me too. And that's an important story for boys and their dogs. And that started me on this path without my knowing it. And I played a lot of football and baseball and had coincidences on the football field and on the baseball field. My favorite one was playing football for Swarthmore College my senior year. The last game of the season, my mother happened to come. She had never watched me play football. She just hoped I would survive. And then turned out she was sitting near a scout for the Oakland Raiders who was there to scout me. And I wouldn't have known that scout was there to scout me if my mother hadn't come to the game and sat next to him. So I get to tell a story about me and the Oakland Raiders.
Well, you know what's an even more, or something, you know, worth exploring the curiosities. Your mother sends you out to find your dog, and your mother lands next to the scout. So here you, and I'm going to predict that she was an incredibly intuitive woman and probably sensed these kinds. I'm just throwing this out there, you know, but I find that interesting. She's steering you. If we want to look at making meaning out of that, she's steering you in both cases.
It's a great comment, Doc Martin. I hadn't really thought of that about my mother, because I'm pretty intuitive too. We're both Pisces. I'm February 27th. She's March 15th. My father, March 12th. My dog was March 13th, we figured. So there were a lot of fish around the house. My brother was a Cancer, so I grew up in a puddle, a lot of water signs.
Tide pool.
A tide pool. Better. That's better. I like that better. Thank you. And my mother being intuitive is probably true, but I can't really. I'll have to think about that because I think that's a wonderful comment, but I can't. Besides these two experiences that I just related, I can't
Mhm,
really think of other direct instances of her being right about something. I mean, it was crazy that she said go to the police.
mhm,
Um, I thought it was a way for her to like to not be responsible because she was supposed to be taking care of him. But the
mhm.
idea that she said that, I love that as it's a much better, it's a much better response than what I'm trying to I was trying to figure out. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. Sometimes I just get these knowings or these senses, but anyway, so you're in Columbia, Missouri. I actually applied to work there on faculty when I was finishing up graduate school. But anyway, so talk about synchronicity. There you are in, doing academic work. How did coincidence start cropping up its head?
They didn't crop up. I've been interested in them for a long time. When I was at Stanford, Stanford's south of San Francisco and not very far, and I became a part-time hippie when I was a
Mhm,
Stanford resident. Back then, I could leave Wednesday night or Thursday morning and head up for the city, and synchronicity was spoken in San Francisco in the late
mhm,
60s and the early 70s. A lot of
mhm,
LSD, psychedelics increased the likelihood of having meaningful coincidences. And by meaningful coincidence, I mean both serendipity and synchronicity. So I experienced a lot of them. There were so many of them that I had to like say, no, I got to be careful about tracking too many of them because it was a rich, rich place to find them. And one of the biggest other see what your comment on this one would be, was on February 26, 1973. I was standing at the sink at the kitchen and on my Victorian house in the Fillmore district of San Francisco, and I was choking. I hadn't eaten anything, but I was still choking, and I couldn't stop it. It just kept going, and then finally it stopped. It's the longest time I ever choked, particularly that long. That long, I never really choked much. And
mhm,
that was 11 p.m. San Francisco time. The next day, my brother called me, February 27th, and said our father had died at 2 a.m. Wilmington, Delaware time, 3,000
mhm.
miles away.
11 to 2. Mhm,
You got it, same time.
mhm, mhm,
And he died bleeding into his throat, choking on his own blood.
mhm.
So around the same time I was choking, he was choking. And so I said, well, maybe I'm not the only one experiencing this. And it certainly made me curious. And I've been able to substantiate through a couple of ways, including my own research, that this sort of experience, feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance, is pretty common.
Well, you're not surprising me with any of this because when I started studying, really starting to go into studying the esoteric, I studied shamanic healing, which often is remote healing. And and you could tell me if you experience this, I had a lot of apprehension of even saying half of the woo woo things I experienced, not only to my patients, but to my colleagues. Um, that it felt like, is this going to take away from my validity and my capacity as a physician? Is it going to label me as a kook? And finally, I just got up the courage and started talking about these kinds of things to my patients. And I would then start exploring more and more of my intuition when a patient was in the exam room with me, to the point where I would stop the logical, physiologic assessment and just say, and how about such and such? And then out would come this miraculous, marvelous conversation. um, like a man who his wife was having chest pain and she wouldn't let him call the ambulance, so he drove the 12 miles to the hospital. She died in the car. And in the shamanic world, when you've got that soul dying in a trauma type of situation, the person next to them generally, if we assume that these are facts, their energy field is deeply connected to that of the dead person, and the dead person doesn't always fully cross over, whether you believe in crossing over a soul, any of that. And so I said to him, I said, do you feel her? And he looked at me sort of puzzled that why is she asking me this? I said, well, when you walk around the house, do you feel that she's there? And then he started telling me these incredible stories. He walked past the coat closet and he smelled violets, which were her favorite flower. Okay, a memory that includes sensory. Okay, I can write that off. Comes home one day and on the sideboard, their wedding picture is there. Well, it had been packed away and hadn't been out accessible for years. And the dog, whom she used to walk every evening, go out to the sunroom, put on the leash on the dog. The dog would jump up and down and down. She'd put on her coat and they'd go for a walk. Well, the dog would jump up and down the same time of the time he would usually go walking, up and down in the sunroom. So out of that, not so simple, but that intuitive moment came a really powerful discussion and a recognition that patients want to talk about this stuff. They want to talk about the things they perceive that are in the unseen world. Do you find that so?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I wanted to establish that the kinds of things you're describing are common. And so I developed the weird coincidence survey. And yeah, a lot of weird stuff is common. Jung himself was afraid to write about synchronicity, for example, because he was afraid the same way you were. I just gave a talk to Department of Psychiatry at UCLA, Harborview, their grand rounds on synchronicity in psychiatry. I'm talking with Andrew Weil's integrative medicine group on synchronicity in medicine. It's starting to happen.
And, regardless of my fears, I took the plunge, but I'm really wanting, my deepest wish is for medicine to start bridging the mystical and this materialistic view that we hold as academicians and medical professionalisms, as this so scientifically driven that we've cut out a huge part of what happens in the universe, in our relationship to nature, our relationship to the unseen world. And we're missing so much depth and so much richness. And when I personally extend that to understanding healing, and I'm thinking about the indigenous healers, how did they do these things? They did remote things. They worked with forces of the unseen world. So it's my deepest hope that we all come out of the closet and open up and include that with science and with, creating a monoclonal antibody, with all of this robotic surgery. But anyway, patients are hungry for it. People are hungry for it. There's a richness in their lives that can only be talked about in these terms. They don't really want to hear the medical aspects of what's wrong with them. They want to know about their life's journey and how you can help them navigate their destiny. I don't know. Am I talking crazy?
You're talking to the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm thinking about is if you want to help me do what I'm doing, trying to get these ideas out into medicine and psychiatry, I'd welcome it.
Oh, I would love that because, and I'll have Gail send you my book. I wrote a book about shamanic healing techniques, maximize your healing power. That should be in the hands of medical students because it's the art of medicine. It's changing your perception, allowing a different perspective in the way you assess somebody, allowing your intuition to guide your decisions. Tell me what your research, what had your questionnaire and what your research has shown.
Well, it's the same thing you're talking about, that weird stuff happens commonly. And my job, and that's why I'm delighted to talk with you, is to continue to get the idea out that weird events like synchronicity happen regularly, and we need them. We need it to be able to break down the mind environment barrier where we think that we're all separate and isolated, and we're not. As you
Mhm.
mentioned so clearly, we are part of nature. We are part of each other. And synchronicity demonstrates that and comes to full fruition in the doctor-patient relationship. Now, I'm going to tell a story that I think you probably have done, but I'd rather hear you tell it for yourself. But it's not uncommon for a psychiatrist to feel that somebody's about to commit suicide, and they call the patient. They can feel that something's going on with the patient.
Mhm.
An otolaryngologist told me about not being able to breathe at 5 a.m. and waking up short of breath. And one of his patients was in the emergency department, short of breath at the same time. That's got to have happened to you.
Yes, and it's when I'm trying to understand and I'm learning this, and you share with me what you know about this. I was talking to Professor Ernst Laszlo, who is a brilliant thinker, as you know, and studies the universal information field, used to call it the Akashic field, and that place where our collective consciousness exists. And I don't know, I don't know that anybody knows the physical construct of that. Like, I can't explain that in physics. I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough about it. But there are things that, as you've studied and you've shown, we're connected in so many ways and so deeply. Um,
You're singing my song, Doc Martin. I mean, because this is what I want to really talk about, not the fact that weird stuff happens, because it does. I want to talk about how it happens.
yes, me too. Tell me.
And I've got some ideas about that. Okay, great.
Good.
I'm so glad we've gotten to this. We're all connected, and without going through more, you've probably talked about this a lot on your show already. I have an explanation for a simple version of that, of telepathy, but
Okay.
the foundation of this idea is that we all exist in a mental atmosphere. It's not just the universe. A lot of people talk about the universal mind or the universe mind. The universe, I'm just a regular doctor. I can't think about the universe, which
Mhm.
keeps expanding. It's too big and it's expanding faster than the speed of light. And we're talking about like we know what the universe is doing. Well, some people do, and Laszlo is one of them. And there are others who may interviewed who talk about the universe as an intelligent organism. I'm just trying to stay right here on Earth. And it's complicated enough right here that we can't get along with each other. We don't know how to be gracious and loving with each other. We have to learn how to do that better than we do. And one way that's going to happen is recognizing we all share the same mind together. And that's what I call the psychosphere, or Tyler D. Chardin called the noosphere. Uh, that is an area that's like our atmosphere, our breathing atmosphere, but it carries around ideas and information. And in it is the Akashic record. There's memories stored in there. Also in there is our ability to communicate with each other over space and over time. defining what the elements are of the psychosphere is a little easier than trying to say what the bigger universe is. And so part of the elements of the psychosphere appear to be magnetic fields. As you mentioned, there's a magnetic field or a biofield around each one of us. Well, those biofields can connect with each other. The Heart Math Institute has shown us how hearts generate magnetic fields, which can then interact with other heart magnetic fields, which you can feel on a dance floor and in other ways. Romance and love can make hearts beat together, literally. Then you expand that a magnetic field to include groups. So there's psychospheres that are jazz groups or athletic groups. And Rupert Sheldrake has written and talked about the morphic resonance and morphic fields, which is an overlapping with what I'm talking about. But I'm suggesting that the Earth's magnetic field can carry information as well as energy. And it is through this Earth magnetic field that this psychosphere is based. The psychosphere functions much like an internet. It's kind of a mental internet. But I think the carrier for it is to some degree the Earth's magnetic field.
Extend that, if you would, into remote healing. And I talked with Stefan Schwartz about this, and he has research that I don't know at all, where he tries to understand what's behind a remote healing. What do you know about that?
A friend of mine is a Reiki healer, Reiki master. And she describes it as going to a place where there's no space and time, where she can be together with the energetic field of the person needing healing. I have trouble with that. I think that we can contact each other through this Earth's magnetic field if we know how to do it. And it's something like putting a search idea into Google. And you can find it. And how we find it is really curious. The most experience I have that I think is related to is I have a need, and you've had this happen to you. And out of the blue, that need is met. How does that happen? Well, I think we send out a signal in this psychosphere, and somehow it finds the resonant pattern that matches the one we have. And I think something like that happens with remote viewing and also happens with remote healing, where patterns resonate. The trick is, how do you find that other person's pattern? That's what I'd like to know.
And I don't know the answer to that either, but I'm going to extrapolate, because some of the language used in the more New Age realm is the vibratory frequency, the vibratory resonance, the attractor pattern. And so the extension of this for me that I love, and I would love to know more about it, is that quiet space, the place of no time, the void, the matrix, the Akashic field, whatever you want to call it, that pluripotent field.
That's a good term.
And for me, how do I can reach that place in meditation, but how do I reach in with my thought holding an attractor pattern of what I want to manifest, put my hands into this vast cauldron of no form, and somehow attract all the little pieces that are going to combine themselves in the material world into what I want? How do I dip my hands into that? Like a diode, when you in the old x-rays, and all the silver would come out and go over to the cathode or something, I don't remember. put your hands in and have them pull out what you want. And is that what's happening? And I don't know the answers to this. Or are we creating a new reality every time that it's really just a thought illusion, and we're creating a new reality that includes this thing we want to manifest? I have no answers, but I love it. So tell me whatever you know about this.
As I try to be scientific, I applaud what you just described, because what's important is that it happens. How it happens we can find out by collecting lots of stories that are based on what you just described. And you've got several speculations. I like pluripotent or plenipotent. But I've basically, I'm kind of a simple guy who's kind of smart, but still simple. And when you talk about creating a resonant pattern, I think there is an attraction somehow, and that's what we don't understand, that gets created in the psychosphere. I can visualize the psychosphere. I can't visualize the space, the place where there's no space and time. I can kind of feel it from an old song. I love you in a place where there's no space and time, but I can't visualize it. And we as human researchers want to be able to imagine it. It really helps. But everything you just described as possible explanations, I think can be thought of as resonant patterns that find another one. And one of the variables I can't really explain very well is how on the internet, when you put in a search for a kind of shoe that you want to buy, and then you start getting all kinds of ads for shoes that are like it, there's a way in which the software of the internet goes through a whole bunch of stuff, but is able to like extract what you are seeking from a smaller pool of possibilities.
And yeah, maybe that's what we're doing. You know, one of the things I wanted to do and it would have been a simple little collection of through a questionnaire. I wanted to write a book down the road, sending out a questionnaire to all these different healers that I know: sound healer, Reiki person, massage therapist, energy worker, whatever you call it. Where do you have to be in a specific frame of mind? And what is that? Do you connect with something outside yourself? And if you do, what is that? Is there a place that you go to mentally before you start your healing? Are there beings, if you call them that, energies, whatever, that you call to bring into effect what's happening? I would love to collect that data and see if I'm sure there's commonalities. I'm sure there's threads of, that would be really, really neat to explore.
Right on, Doc Martin. Right on. I'd love to see you do that. It's not easy to do surveys well. I know that from what I've done with the Weird Coincidence survey. You got to make them valid and reliable, which takes a lot of money and statistical knowledge. I had some research assistants at the University of Missouri because I was chairman. I could pay for it through being chairman. Can't pay for it now.
Right.
What you're talking about is the question I asked my friend, the Reiki master, and and it wasn't enough of an answer for me. And you're asking the good question, especially about, hey, do you come up with some kind of beings out there that kind of help you along on this thing? And there's the question of, are there beings or are there energy patterns that you tune into? And sometimes there's a combination of the two of them, but there's something that you do to get out there to help somebody. I love the question. Please keep going with it. You're asking, you really want to know the answers to those.
So on that topic of the beings, and I'll talk in generality and I'll share a story. I do believe there are intelligences, unseen intelligences. I believe that it's not just a void, and that humans are
No,
not.
there's a lot of stuff in the psychosphere. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
my view of it is let's map out these beings floating around, the beings that
Mhm.
don't want to leave yet, but still attached to us in some way or another because
Right.
of love or other reasons. There's a lot of stuff floating around out there, and some of it's helpful and some of it isn't. So please continue.
And not all of it is human or formerly human.
What is it? What are some of it?
Right. Well, the shamans, what from whom I've learned, each thing in nature holds an energy and an intelligence. I mean, in how many indigenous do you hear about fairies, elves, nature spirits, wood nymphs? So I'll tell you my story about the dragons. So I'm on a trip to Sedona with 7 women. We were a meditation group and we went to Sedona. And one of the things we did is we hired a guy who had mapped out the energy ley lines of the area and the energy vortexes. And he took us up on the Red Rock, and he was now exploring dragon energy. Well, I'm like, okay. To me, that all I knew about is extremely scary. It was something of, the Gothic comic books and, big scary dragon. And so he took us up onto the plateau, and we were on the rock, sun beating down, and we did a meditation to connect to an earth dragon. I felt a presence, a current of energy, a force so unbelievably powerful. I wasn't afraid. And because he had said, this is what we're going to connect to, I gave it the name dragon. And I visualized what I thought a dragon might look like. And very, very powerful. And I felt incredible wisdom from this power, and a sense that we were talking primordial power. So I thought, this is cool. I'm going to ask this dragon, since I'm not afraid of it, if it would, stay with me when I went home to Maryland, and would it assist me in my little bit of shamanic healing that I was doing besides being a regular office doc. So my sister came over a couple weeks later, and I was doing an energy healing silently, no words. And there was a difficult part, and I asked the dragon, would you help me? So I'm a good visualizer. I can make a movie about anything. So I have a picture of this dragon in my mind. Well, all of a sudden there are 2 others show up. So I have Celadon Green, which is the one that came from Sedona, and then this peacock iridescent blue-green, and then this smaller cobalt blue. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then the rest of the session goes really well. So afterwards, I said to my sister, what do you think about this? She said it was really good. And I said, well, I asked the dragon to help me. She said, oh, yeah. She said, I saw them. I saw, you saw the dragon? She said, no, I saw 3 of them. Green, blue, purple, and blue. So I'm like, cool. Because, I'm ready to believe this. I don't question anymore. To me, it's real. It's my mental fantasy, whatever it is. So then, fast forward from 2008 to about 3 years ago, when I was interviewing a shaman from Mongolia through a translator, and he was one of 8th-generation shamans, and he channeled, we call it channeling in today's new age world. When he went into trance, his great 8th-generation back grandfather, who was a shaman, came through and worked the session with the client. And this young man said to me through the translator, what beings do you work with? Who are your spirit animals? Oh, I said, the bear, the jaguar. And the translator shook his head no. And so I'm sheepishly about to say dragon. And the translator said, he says you work with dragons. So, you can't tell me there, for the people who say, oh, this is this, he took a guess, blah, blah, blah. 13,000 miles away on a Zoom call with someone I've never met before, and they see the dragons in my world. Not, not wizards, not, So to me, we're connected. I can't wait for you, Stefan Schwartz, whomever's figuring it out, to figure it out so I can learn about it.
That's a good story about the dragons, and I'm glad we're getting to this, because it's this idea of yours that you can't tell whether it's your imagination or not, it just because you like to visualize the things, you're good at it. No, you've got to believe it. You got to believe that your mind is scientifically oriented enough, even if, for whatever reason you think it's not enough, but it's enough to be able to say, I think this is real. And I've had to do that myself. I was just doing some holotropic breathing. Could be holographic too. The other day, and I, among other things, during the breathing, I ascended a spiral made out of smoke, gray, smoky, and I ascended this spiral up into what I'll call the psychosphere. And in that psychosphere, I opened my heart and could feel the energy of this psychosphere coming through me and coming to me. And then a little later, as I went back up to the spiral and I was kind of floating around in the top of this spiral, I went up a little bit and I could feel my higher self. Now, we talk a lot about higher selves. I think we all have a higher self, and at least one version of that is attached to our minds, which are around our skulls for a lot of the time, but can expand higher into the psychosphere. And part of that connection is with a cord of some kind to our higher self, which can see things that we can't because it's got a better perspective up there. Mm-hmm. So I came in energetic contact with my higher self. And I'm like you in this thing. I kind of doubt this. Did I make this up? Is this me running a movie of something that I'd like to be able to see sometime? Well, I have to dissuade myself from that. I have to dissuade myself. It's just, I have enough experience with reality that I think both of us. So you saw dragons, they helped you. He could see the dragons because his mind was able to, and this is what we have to understand. How did he do that? To see that you and the dragons were relating to each other. That I think the psychosphere is a way to do it, and there are people who are better at maneuvering themselves into where they want to go by targeting where they want to go, because he's talking to you indirectly, but he's still talking to you, so they can get over to you and see who you are and experience you, and then report to you what you already know about yourself.
Yeah, I love that. When you were describing that cord, when I was taught in the shamanism training, that was the Peruvian style and how they saw it, and they saw the light body around the person, and they saw the golden, the golden halo sphere, that higher self, where the higher self lives. And there is a gold and silver cable coming down through the whole body, through all the chakras. So there's all of this indigenous mysticism that I hope you and I, in our ways, can really bring into the world of modern mainstream medicine. It's so rich and can steer. I'd also love to help, and maybe you can tell me how I can participate in this, help incoming medical students trust the art of medicine, trust their intuition, expand their perception, see things through different eyes, to be more they really have access to so much more data.
Your heart is yearning for this to
Yes.
happen. I can tell. I mean, and it's with such love for the practice of medicine that you say these things, and I can feel it as you say it, and you just want to like help people in far better ways than they're being trained, and it's frustrating because they're not listening. At least the teachers aren't listening. I'm
Mhm.
trying that with not use the word synchronicity that much, but I do. But meaningful coincidences is not as loaded as synchronicity. But here I did two talks to medical people using the word
Mhm.
synchronicity. So I'm like synchronicity is an arrow, like a spear to begin to puncture that rational wall that medicine holds for itself. And it's you got to punch it. You got to like keep going at it. And I
It's
know people,
also your abracadabra word,
what do you mean?
because it's also like the open sesame. So you use a word that their pretty limited, narrow focus brain can hold on to. And then as you start to expand it, then all of a sudden they see it and get moved by it. And anyway, but yes,
I'd
that
add something to what you just said. The word is so important, what words you use, especially these days, but it's always very important. It's an abracadabra, opens the door, gets something to happen. There's another one that also is very helpful, which I do with trainees when I can get them, which is to rely on their own experiences and then in a group to tell each other their synchronistic experiences.
Mhm.
I did that the other day with a group of fellows at the integrative medicine place in Tucson, and they were amazed to hear the stories of some of their colleagues. They just didn't know them. But I gave them a format that was
Mhm.
permissive for them to tell their own story. So I would add to what you said about the word is they can find in their own experience to varying degrees some of the things that we are talking about.
And then when they see that their their colleagues have similar, then they're not so afraid on a day-to-day basis to talk about it or to say, I got a bad feeling when I went in that room.
Yeah,
you know do you
yeah.
remember this, Dr. B? Do you remember there's a study, we were told this in medical school, that when we first started our clinical rotations, that without even looking at the chart, when a doctor walked into the room, they could be 85% certain how the patient was going to fare. So, in other words, and I might not have the details right, but the point being, are they going to, how bad are they? You can feel it, you can see it. You don't need the chart to tell you. You can tell when there's no life force. You can see it, you can feel it. So you can feel it when they're going over the cliff. You can feel it when they've rallied and they're going to make it. I don't know what that study was, but those kinds of experiences and capacities, we've got to keep those alive in these young trainees. We got to not let them shut it down.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And what you just described is visual, comes in visually, even olfactory, although we don't pay direct attention to that, but also energetically. That
Mm-hmm.
if you're sensitive the way you are to energy fields, when somebody walks into your presence, including me, you pick up stuff. I know you do. And
Mm-hmm.
you translate that into words or actions when necessary. And you can do that with your patients. I've got patients I see on Zoom, and I can tell just looking at her face, as well as what she feels like, what it feels like looking at her, how she's feeling. I mean,
Right.
it's evident if right there without any words being
Yeah.
spoken.
And to not, I think the thing that was, I had to teach myself, don't squelch that.
Don't squelch that.
Don't squelch it. And even there's the don't ignore it, don't squelch it. And then there's the act on it. But to come out of the room and the patient is left and go to the nurse's station on a day, maybe week to week basis, maybe not day to day, and stand there and say, this isn't going to be good. This is not good. What's happening right now? I have a bad feeling. Sending him for the CAT scan, I have a bad feeling. But where I'm going also, and you tell me what if you've experienced this, and we learned about this in shamanic training with the concept that the shaman can help steer the destiny to a less probable but still possible outcome.
Huh.
So you have a CAT scan and I have a bad feeling. How to hold that wish, intention, prayer, thought that it's going to be a less probable but still possible, not
Outcome.
bad.
Yes. That's so important because modern medicine hexes patients.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's powerful words right there. Yeah, it just. And so I'll give you an example because I think we know that words matter.
They do.
I had a patient had some enlarged lymph nodes, went and had a scan and went to the oncologist who said, oh, it's a follicular lymphoma, but it simmers. So you're fine. Go home. It simmers. And she came back and she said, okay, I'm going up to Geisinger Danville. So a bigger, tertiary care center. I'm going to have somebody else look at it. Well, this oncologist said this without ever biopsying it. Went to Danville, was biopsied, it was sarcoid. Not lymphoma. She wasn't going to croak in 10 years. And it's not just in medicine, just in life in general. The words do hex. Don't say something like, oh, don't go out there today. That's going to be bad on that road. That's like reaching into that plenipotent space and bringing badness down.
Agreed. Agreed. There's a story of a woman diagnosed with multiple sclerosis very early. She's still moving around a lot and capable. And the neurologist goes outside of the consulting room and brings in a wheelchair and says, this is what you're going to be in a few years.
That's black magic. That's cruel. That's condemning. It's just bad juju. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a podiatrist. I kind of know him, and I was having my big toes going in like that. There's a name for it, and it wasn't hurting, but I didn't like the way it looked. And he gave me some ideas, and then he says, Bernie, you're falling apart. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that.
No. So we've got 5 minutes till we close up. I've loved our discussion. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love getting to know you better and seeing how crazy you are. I think it's wonderful.
I'm a little out there.
You're somewhat out there, and more than somewhat sometimes. So no, it's great. And I'm telling you, I'm glad to know you so that somewhere I could find a way to contact you. I hope I do have your email address, I guess.
Yes.
In case I can get something going more with integrative medicine for sure. But maybe, to me, it's a big deal to be talking to UCLA Harborview about synchronicity.
It's a big deal. That's really good. Good job. Abracadabra.
And that's because I knew somebody. I was chairman and he was chairman, and we talked about psychotherapy. And I know Andrew Weil at the integrative medicine thing. So it's knowing people who trust us. And that's the way I've been trying to get in there. And you've got more to say than I do. You've really got some good clinical experience. I write a lot, and stuff, but you've got some wonderful clinical experience that other people need to hear. And if there's some way that I can facilitate that with the right people, I'm going to ask you.
Perfect. I'll be right there and learning along with you and pushing the envelope,
Push that envelope.
banging on the door of that really walled in castle with the big moat with the alligators. We're gonna
beautiful,
on the
correctly.
I'm also going to have Gail send you a copy of my book, because we need to, Bernie, we need to change the world.
No kidding.
I mean, I could just cry at what's going on. It's been bad enough since COVID, but then you add all this other stuff, and
let me add something to that, because I'm a healer of the world too. And what I'm trying to write now about is the psychosphere and synchronicity as part of the healing process that the humanity has to go through. I'll stop right there, but I know you feel the same way. How can we help humanity from destroying itself and the world around us?
Right. I read a article recently, and you can get it, Charles Eisenstein,
yeah.
Yeah, he's a smart writer.
He really is. He's great.
But anyway, his most recent article wasn't quite in the words we're using, but once we see, and I'm preaching to the choir, once we see that when we can see we're connected and open to loving our connections, we can overcome some of these horrors.
Doc Martin, Sharon, this is what gets me mad. Of course, that's right. But how are you going to do it? How are you going to have people experience their interconnectedness? And synchronicity is one good way for that to happen.
And teaching each individual, because they can affect their local environment. And we teach them, and I used to laugh at George Bush Sr., points of light, but now I see it. Put out those points of light out there and light up the world.
Yeah, with your energy, with your mind, with your increasingly higher vibration.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you want to tell? We've got 1 minute. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, that you and I are physicians who feel great empathy for humanity and for the natural world. Trees are particularly important to me because I communicate with them. And we want to find a way to help alleviate the suffering of our patients, but of humanity now. And we have to do that. And I have one way, synchronicity. It's not the only way, but it is a common experience that can lead to recognizing our interconnectedness with each other and with nature and with the earth itself.
I love that. So everybody, I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine. This was Dr. Bernard Beitman. What a good talk. What a great open heart, Bernie. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I've loved talking with you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. It was a delight meeting you and talking with you.
You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.